Hi, my name is Juanita Charles. I am the founder and executive director of Manifest Magic Black Girl Cooperative. Thank you all for joining us yet again for another installment in our Black Maternal Health Week series. And today we are here with a very special guest, and I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Juanita. Hello, my name is Naima Beckles. I am uh, zooming in from New York City. Really happy to be here in conversation with you. I am a birth doula. I'm also a doula coordinator. So I manage a team of doulas here in New York City, and I'm a childbirth educator. Happy to be here.
Perfect, perfect. And so again, just kind of having a conversation. We are just really interested to learn about, interested in learning about Lamaze International, your association and with Lamaze, and then how you all operate in your goals. Just a lot of questions. So just take it away.
Yes, that's great. I'm so glad that you asked me about Lamaze. So yes, I'm a Lamaze certified childbirth educator, and Lamaze is probably an organization that maybe some of you have heard of, or if you haven't heard of the organization, maybe you have just heard of Lamaze. And so people often wonder, is Lamaze a birthing technique? Is Lamaze a way of breathing? What is Lamaze? Sometimes Lamaze is just a punchline, like we see it in TV shows. Someone is pregnant and they go to a class with their partner and they sit on the living room floor and then they practice breathing.
Right.
Right? That's Lamaze. Right. That is one little small component of Lamaze. So a breathing strategy can be helpful to a person who's laboring, but that is just a small piece. The Lamaze organization is an organization that trains and certifies people to be childbirth educators. And it also provides information to parents, people who are pregnant, expecting babies, if they want to learn more about either how to take a Lamaze class or how to take a class online or how to find more materials, how to get evidence-based information about their birth and pregnancy, Lamaze is your resource.
How long were you in practice before you connected with Lamaze?
Yeah, so my story is that I didn't know anything about Lamaze. I didn't know what a doula was when I was pregnant. So I had my first baby about 16 years ago. And learned what a doula was while I was pregnant, hired a doula, took a childbirth class. It happened to be taught by a Lamaze certified childbirth educator, and had a really great experience just learning all of that stuff, not even knowing all the things that I needed to know. And what was different for me than some of my friends was that I was having a really positive birth experience and pregnancy experience, and I was hearing people who had gone before me have these really traumatic experiences. So I think that the education that I had, the access that I had to doula support, and also my prenatal care, my care during birth, all of that was done by a Black midwife. All of that really helped guide me towards this whole field of childbirth educators. And so I was previously a middle and high school teacher. I taught for about 10 years before I became a childbirth educator. And after I had two kids, I decided that I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to control my time more. I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur of some sort. So because I was a teacher, I thought I could be a childbirth educator. I could put my skill set of teaching to this now new kind of interesting field that I didn't know really existed. So I became a Lamaze educator because a friend of mine who was like a mentor to me, she had had a baby a year before I did. She was also a teacher and she was a Lamaze educator. She told me that Lamaze was a good place to get started. And so I did. Like I found out about the training, I got trained, and for Lamaze, you have to train and then take an exam. And once you pass the exam, you're a certified educator. And so I went down that path.
Oh, that's awesome. And so you said that was how many years ago?
Well, it's been 10 years now, 10 or 11 years since I've been a childbirth educator.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Okay. Okay. Well, that sounds very exciting. So, what would you consider to be some of your I guess what are some of your best experiences being a childbirth educator?
Yeah. I really enjoy teaching adults, and adults who are smart come to the room with lots of information and life experience, but don't know very simple things about their bodies, because I was in their seat all those years ago when I was pregnant with my first. So I really love teaching people about their bodies, about this very specific time in pregnancy and labor and birth, and what the body is going to do, and teaching people about what's literally happening in their bodies during the time that they give birth helps to kind of quiet some of the fear that people go into childbirth with. So I like being able to do that for people. So I do think that childbirth can be a lot easier, a lot more empowered when we actually know what is literally happening. If we don't know what's happening, then we imagine the worst and we rely on television and Hollywood to tell us what's going to happen in birth. And that's often not the case.
Oh, so what are some of the biggest lessons or um, I guess first of all, some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about childbirth, and then what are some of the most important things that you think people need to know that maybe we miss?
People are often worried about pain, and rightfully so, because birth is depicted as the most horrible, frightening, painful thing that will ever happen to your body. And what people don't know and can learn in a childbirth class is that pain in labor has a purpose. The purpose is to get your baby down and out. And pain in labor often is not ongoing. Labor has a really special design where it is created, like labor gives you breaks, right? So we
Hmm.
have contractions that can be very intense, that can be hard, and then there are breaks so that you can catch your breath, recover, and get ready. So I like to tell people that labor is much more like an endurance sport that you
Yes.
can like prepare and train for than it is just the worst pain you'd ever experience. It's not like chipping a tooth or like having a root canal or like all these other things of breaking a bone that people may experience as being, it's like really, really painful. It doesn't have to be that. Now it can be that when labor gets managed by medicine, right? So if people are having things done to them while they're in labor, like they're being induced, um there are medications being like applied to their bodies during the time that they're in labor, if they are having or recovering from a cesarean birth, like that's different because those are not the way that the body normally or typically unfolds for labor. But the way that the body normally typically unfolds for labor, for a person who is relatively healthy, and most pregnant people are relatively healthy, then the pain has a purpose. And so understanding what that purpose is, understanding what the cadence is of the labor, and understanding that you can do something to help yourself feel more in control of your body, and not like everything is just happening to you. So I think I may have gotten to one part of your question, Juanita. You want to ask the second part?
Oh no, no, that was perfect. Just really understanding what the process is and why it's important to know, so we're not like you said, TV is always like, oh, blah, 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 and it's like, all right,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
I tell people that, like, yeah, think of the birth that you've seen on TV, and think of a movie that you've seen where birth was depicted. And the thing that happens every single time is the water breaks. Then there's like a mad dash to get to the hospital. And then she's like kicking and screaming, being wheeled in. And then there's like one, two, three, push, baby shows up, and that baby is crying right away.
yeah.
All of that is drama. Like, that is all, that is like people sit down in a writing room to make a scene, and they have to take the most dramatic pieces of the birth and squish it into 45 seconds.
Yes.
Like, labor on average for a person who's never given birth before is about 24 hours, right? If we had to depict that on screen, it would be so boring. No one would want to watch that. So the parts that get depicted again and again are those exciting parts. The water breaking, very exciting. Does that happen as the first sign of labor all the time? Nope.
And my water has never broken. I had 3 kids, and my water has never broken. They had to
Right.
break it every time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. And that is a much more common story, but that's not fun to watch on TV,
Right.
right? Right. The water breaks as the first sign of labor, maybe 10% of the time. It doesn't usually. On TV, 100% of the time.
Right.
And so when people don't know that, if people don't take a childbirth class, if people don't read a book, if people don't talk to their aunties and friends, then they rely on what they saw on TV. And so they're like waiting for their water to break and waiting for that exciting moment. It's like
Yeah.
it might not come.
And so, and that's the thing too. So just on that piece. And so as I want to say, I don't know. I just remember the doc. She was saying something. She was like, "Oh, and your mucus plug and your bloody show and your." I'm like, "Girl, what?" Like,
Yes,
And
yes.
so, can you talk a little bit about like you said, what the typical process looks like?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So I think of a childbirth class as first a vocabulary lesson because
Oh,
what we're doing is defining all those things. We're defining mucus plug, we're defining water break. Like what is literally breaking? It's the amniotic sac. Where's the amniotic sac? It's in the uterus, right? And when it breaks, what happens? What does that mean? Usually contractions are going to come faster behind them. What's contracting? Your
yeah,
uterus is contracting. What does a contraction feel like? It feels like a squeeze and a push. Like all those things are helping people just now be able to speak the language that they'll be speaking with their care provider when they're in their birth location. So childbirth classes are first a vocabulary lesson. And so, yeah, the things that happen, the steps that happen typically when it's time to give birth, a whole orchestration of hormones kind of get into line in your body, and the hormones send a message from your brain to your uterus and to some ligaments in the pelvis that hey, time's up for this baby. It's time for this baby now to come on out, right? And so the labor is the process of everything in your body waking up to, oh, okay, we got to get this human that we just grew out. How do we do that? We do that by the uterus contracting. The uterus has to squeeze around that baby and press down so that the cervix, which is the first opening that the baby's going to come out of, can get soft and open up. That cervix is really narrow. It's the thing that needs to open up to 10 centimeters, and it's the contractions that make that open. Inside the cervix is also something called the mucus plug. Once that mucus plug comes out, that is the sign to the body that, oh, the cervix is softening because it can no longer hold it. I think of the mucus plug as kind of like a cork in a bottle. And when that cork pops, it means, oh, things are
how we
getting
know.
started, right? Something is coming. So those are kind of like the things that people need to know. Like those are the first signs of labor, that mucus starting to ease on out or come out all in one big clump. Um, and and yeah, contractions starting and not stopping, right? So you can have contractions start days before you're in labor, weeks before you're in labor, but those contractions are usually what we call warm-up contractions or Braxton Hicks contractions. Sometimes they're contractions that are there to tell your body to get some rest, get some hydration, and get some food. Like those contractions can be an inner alarm in your body as well, like telling you just to slow down a little bit. Your body pretends to go into labor when it gets kind of tired and
Yeah.
stressed. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that is so interesting, but because people say, "Oh yeah, I'm just having them, but I'm just going." It never dawned on me that it's like a signal, like, "Okay, girl, you're there's something you're supposed to be doing."
Yes.
Oh yeah, I think people will get a lot out of that. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. If you're in your third trimester and you are having contractions and you're noticing like these contractions like happen in a cluster like every evening, well, every evening you're probably dehydrated and tired, so you need to sit down, get something to drink, put your feet up for half an hour, and those contractions will probably subside. Now, if contractions don't subside, they start to get stronger, last longer, and come closer together. That is a sign that you could be in labor.
And so when you're in labor, so like you said, like Lamaze, there's a lot of like because that's what people think. Do
Yeah.
you also teach that, like the breathing techniques?
I mean, we teach coping strategies, and
Okay.
breathing is one coping strategy, and how that breathing gets taught might differ from educator to educator.
Mhm.
So when I'm teaching breathing techniques, I'm really getting people to focus in on slowing their breathing down, because the body does better in labor when we can relax. And I'm also trying to get people to think about breathing, helping that big uterus, that big muscle, get oxygen to it and blood circulating to it so it can work better. So thinking about breathing again the way that you would, like if you were doing something really strenuous, like an endurance sport again, is how I might frame breathing for people. And there can be breathing patterns that can be helpful if you find that kind of thing helpful. But if you think that that's maybe not for me, like the you don't need to do that. You can choose other coping strategies, and there are lots of coping strategies, right? You're a dancer, right? A coping strategy might be a playlist and dancing, right?
Yeah.
Um, Coping strategies for other people might be things to snack and drink while you're in labor. Maybe it's a distraction like watching your favorite terrible reality show. Like all that is really good to
Yeah.
have in your back pocket for coping in labor.
Oh, that's cool. So so The Office is like our show, and my daughter was actually born to The Office theme when she was coming out. I
Oh
was
my goodness,
Yeah.
I breastfed my firstborn to all of The Office,
Yeah.
like for maybe 6 weeks.
Yeah. It was good. It's like even now sometimes she'll hear the thing and it's just like and I'm like and she's
I
5.
know the yeah,
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 she's like,
yeah.
"I know what that is," so it's so interesting. So
That's so funny. Yes, I
so
totally relate to The Office as being part of my early years with the baby,
Yeah,
early
look,
days.
I know we talked about the process of birth, what's happening with your body, some coping strategies. And so I guess just going back to the previous points, what are some of the other things that you found you've had to educate people on, including their significant others, that a lot of people miss or just are not aware of?
Yeah, there are two things that come to mind for me. One is um, talking through and preparing a birth plan. And when I say a birth plan, I don't mean have a plan that's written down that you're going to give to a doctor or a nurse when you get to a hospital and say, here's what I want to happen in my birth. Like that's not what I mean. I mean, talk if there is a partner or a friend or a doula who's going to be a part of your birth experience, then you ought to have conversations with those support people because they're your main support. So people
Yeah.
sometimes wrongly think that they're the hospital staff, like the doctors, their main support, or the nurses, their main support. What's more common is that the people who you bring to be with you in the time that you give birth are your main support. They're the people who are going to be with you the longest and be like most hands-on.
Yeah.
Um, Doctors typically arrive to do a couple checks and catch that baby, right?
Yeah.
Nurses also are there to do a couple checks, fulfill doctor's orders, but also they're taking care oftentimes of more than one person at a time.
Right.
So you want to have your birth preferences or your birth plan kind of talk through with your main people. And it's helpful to write them up, but you're writing them up so that you remember what your main things are, like your talking points, right? It's important to me that the lights be dim in the room because I don't want like those hospital lights distracting me, right?
Mm.
Great. You don't need to tell a nurse that. Like your partner can be the one to dim the lights in the room. And so if they know that, then great. Then you've already talked through that. I want pictures taken when the baby is born, but I want pictures just like above the waist, right? Great. No doctor or nurse is doing that for you.
Yeah.
You can do that. And even more kind of clinical things. So if it's I want the epidural, but I don't want to be offered it right away, right? I'll tell you when I want it, right? That's a birth preference that people can state, and their partner can know and not be hearing about it for the first time when they're giving birth. So those are all really helpful things. And having a birth plan is just it's like making a plan for a party. Not that giving birth is like a party, but we think through all the steps of having a party, throwing a baby shower, taking a trip with friends, right? Making an itinerary for a vacation. You can do the same thing for your birth, knowing that everything may not happen the way you plan, but just that you've walked through a couple different scenarios can be really helpful. And then another thing that I want people to be aware of and think about is a postpartum plan, right? So after your baby is born, what are some things that you want to have in place or you think that you'll need, and like kind of talk through that too. What does it look like if you're breastfeeding a newborn? Like, what does it look like to be exclusively breastfeeding? It's going to look like you with your hands full all day and all night, right? So you need meal prep. People to step up to do that. So if you have family members who are like, oh, let me know how I can help with the baby, you can help with the baby by putting 2 or 3 freezer meals in the freezer for me so that I can eat while I'm feeding the baby, right? That's really important. You want to also just have postpartum plans for how people are going to visit you, visit your baby, be helpful in your home, like all these kind of things that we don't necessarily think to because a lot of our time might get taken up in preparing for the birth.
Do you do virtual education?
I do that sometimes. There's a way to find me if you want to do a one-on-one session for sure. What I do more frequently is teaching. So people who are doulas or educators or any kind of
Oh,
care
perfect.
provider, like I provide trainings for them. I do trainings to help people think about and support folks who've experienced pregnancy loss. So that's one thing that I do, and I also do doula trainings, as I said before. So yeah.
Okay. And so I was getting ready to sign off, but I kind of want to come back to the pregnancy loss. So
Hmm.
there are a lot of women in our community who experience, and it's almost like it happens and it's almost like you move on. So even outside of the there's definitely an emotional and all of those, there's a lot of different aspects to it. But is there any maybe one or two particular points that you like to just drive home when you're dealing with those birthing people?
Yeah. So when people are experiencing loss, I think what can be most helpful to them from their support folks who are around them is that they have someone who they can either share silence with or share their story with. And the people who show up to support them can be there to receive either or there to provide space for to do either. So if all that they want to do is just like not talk about it, but be with people, know that that's okay, that you're doing something. Sometimes people get really stuck on, I don't have the right words to say, I don't know what to do. We can follow the person who has experienced the loss. We can follow their lead, right? So if what they want is just to tell the story again and again, like you're doing something by hearing that story for them, right? Witnessing their truth. And sometimes also if what they want to do is distract themselves and maybe not deal with it right now, you can still show up for them by being alongside them, right? Being on their journey, walking alongside them is doing something. Some things perhaps not to do is to fill space with lots of words to help them feel better, right? Like it's going to be okay. You can have another baby. You're still young. You can try to get all those things that people just do, like kind of out of a reflex because it's not comfortable to not say much, right? Or you think that, oh, I'm the elder in the family. I need to have the words of wisdom. Sometimes, like, just,
Yeah, just be quiet. Just let it,
mhm, mhm.
especially for those of us who tend to be like fixers. You're like, okay, how can I fix it? It's like, girl, just sit. Like, I just need you just
Yeah,
here, but like quiet here.
yeah, just sit, just check in. I'm thinking about you today, send a text, whatever, like that. can
Yeah.
be really, really helpful than trying to come up with all the right things to say and do.
Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. And we'll see how we can support each other.
Yeah, yeah, I'll do that. And if people also want to learn more about Lamaze and becoming a Lamaze educator or finding a Lamaze educator in your community, I'll share that as well.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and thank you.
Yes, thank you.